This
Everybody.
conference will now be recorded.
Oh, thank you, Michael. Hey, just a couple quick announcements. For everybody who participated and helped out with the charter, thank you very much. That went to IC last week, or, well, sorry, week before, and we do have approval on that. So I believe that means we're an official IC project. So it's good. Thank you very much, everyone. And was that correct, Jeff? That means we're an official IC project?
I think we're a project still in the incubation phase until we
Yeah.
have a
Okay.
contribution. Then we come out of the incubation phase, I
Ah,
believe.
great, great. Yep, that's wonderful. Yeah, so we're official incubation project. All right. And with that out of the way, I'll just put it out there that I think this meeting might be a little shorter. I am going to go ahead and share my screen. And what I want us to take a look at is we started a draft of requirements gathering for specifically wireless on the enterprise side. So what our goal is, just to recap, is really to gather a set of requirements that will essentially mean this is what it is to be OCP uh, um, enterprise connectivity solutions wireless. And then what we want to do is find the existing solutions out there, particularly for the software side, and map them to what we have defined as the features. So let me go ahead and pull up that working sheet, and I'll also paste a link into the chat so everybody else could follow along. Okay, let's just see this here. Thank you. Okay. And so I did take a look and see if we didn't have any comments, but we didn't have any comments, but we did have some additions to these higher level requirements. Let me just maybe make this a little bigger for everybody here. Let's see, how do I see maybe this? Oh, okay, it doesn't seem to want to go bigger. Ah, there we go. Now it's going. Okay. All right. And just for kind of an overview of this document, it's a cover sheet listing what this is, which is the requirements and feature matrix. So we have a start of the requirements, columns, just an ID, which is just kind of giving it a unique identifier, a topic, which we could see here has sort of few different entries, architecture, regulation, security. And that's funny. I wonder if this table is not actually pulling down all the way. I'll have to check that later, but I would guess that also reliability would be in that list, but I'll fix that afterwards. And then just a short title with a description. This level was a suggestion from last time. This basically indicates whether this is something that needs to be in if we are going to call it OCP ECS, or if it's a nice to have feature, which is what we have baseline plus for. So, and then notes is pretty self-explanatory, just any additional information that might be pertinent. So let me just quickly, any questions on that? Okay. Sure. There we go. This is what I want. Okay. All right. So just right off the bat, we have a few for architecture. Why don't I just, let's sort by architecture. Let's see what happens here. Yeah, see, this is not part of the table. I gotta fix that, which is not a problem. But now let's just select them all now. For now, maybe we could sort B to Z. There we go. Well, actually, same problem. Okay, no worries. So the disaggregation of software and hardware, we've talked about that tremendously. That's something we want to include in the base level requirements, meaning that in order for your platform to be considered in this, is just the ability to take the software off and replace it with a new software. That kind of ties into this one. I'm wondering maybe if we should maybe merge these two. Okay. All right. Any questions on these two? I think that's pretty table stakes at this point, especially since we're talking about open source hardware. So
Are you defining this aggregation of software from hardware so that you can use the same software with any hardware?
yeah, or I guess put a different way, the ability to load different types of software onto the same hardware. So getting away from the insert vendor name here of hardware and software stack that needs to be procured together, and doesn't have the same choice as if we were implementing it with a openness in mind, and being able to switch it out. Switch it out with because some of the ones we were looking at was the tips. The tips creation. There's OpenWRT. There's a number of them, and actually that would be a good idea to actually add here. Thank you for that. That was a really good recommendation. What I'm going to go ahead and do is add another tab in here. I'm going to call this definition. Definitions. Okay. I'm going to slide this one over. And let me actually put here. Okay. Yeah. And so any of the definitions that are going to be important to know to read this document, we'll start populating those in this tab. Okay. Thank you for that.
So Jack, on those two topics, should we be specifying a given minimum test case, for people to apply against the the applicability of this? Because I mean, right now this kind of just says that, hey, network operating system of choice on a hardware unit. Should we be specifying that in order to validate compliance? Because there's literally dozens of them out there. You know what I mean?
Right.
You go down the path of standard Linux distros that have these capabilities, as well as companies like Adva, NIA. You go down the list. I mean, there's a boatload of them. Should we be specifying that in order to satisfy this, you must be able to load these 3 or these 5 or open source versions, but not limited to, but you must be able to do these, kind of a thing.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I guess what I'd start with is, I think what we also want is a minimum feature set on there where it is shipping with an operating system that has the capabilities built in to switch to any of a but you're right, which ones are supported with that. And what I would say is let's consider that if we're talking about a standard Linux distribution, that ability to switch out is more built into that operating system, and the glue that we provide on the back end of that. We already talked about that a little bit with the possibilities of ONI or something like an ONI Plus that would have some extra glue in there to allow for that. But I absolutely agree with your point. Is how do you define this as well? How do you define what is the ability to switch? Which targets do we have to consider? I think what that's also going to flush out to as well is when we're defining these requirements, and sort of it's going to filter out certain network operating systems to not be in those requirements, and there's going to be a subset of the available space out there that meets those requirements. So I hope that helps. But yeah, no, that's a minimum test case.
I think one more thing I want to add to that too, Jack, is that I almost believe that the ability to switch the operating system shouldn't be a function of the operating system itself. And there's open source solutions that exist out in the industry today, such as SDO, which run on Intel, ARM, AMD, anything along those lines. Should that be where this starts for this separation of the hardware and software disaggregation? So that basically you have some small kernel that then calls home, that then loads essentially what the solution is. Now some people may want to take advantage of that, some may not, but I think that's something that I think we need to consider, because at the end of the day, that's really what people want. They don't want to be tied to a particular operating system, and they want to be able to essentially deploy the whatever solution they see fit. So
Yeah, no, and it's a shame Sebastiano wasn't able to make it. He's the other co-lead. He has a lot of experience in this, and probably would talk more intelligently to it with his company Tenaza. Yeah, that was exactly it. As we create these requirements, and these devices start getting put out there, it's the you're right, it's the ability to be able to call out somewhere, ask who am I, what OS am I supposed to have on, and then give it more information on where to get those things, and to that extent, I think one of the questions is whether it does become somewhat part of an operating system, and that's going to be the initial operating system that it ships with from the factory, so that when it boots up, right off the bat, has that ability to do that calling home.
And I do think there, to me, that doesn't need to be different. That should be the same for essentially every single box that's shipped. We should define that as this organization that says, hey, this is, thou shalt do it this way, and it will call home, to whatever registry service, and what I mean, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
However you want to do it. So
Yeah.
And I think there's solutions that exist out there. Like I said, I know Intel has SDO, and they've done that with a very large community. Actually, we didn't start that. We've just leveraged it. But there could be other solutions that we want to consider, adopting. I don't think we need to reinvent the wheel there. I don't know how others feel, but.
This is the one from Facebook. Just sharing some of the experiences we had over a tip with Open Wi-Fi. we sort of had the same guidelines, right, where somebody could pick up a white box access point and plug it in, and it would call home, and would sort of allow you to redirect to different cloud providers or controller providers. I think what we found is sort of like anything else, the devil's in the details. And then when you start listing the more fine-grained requirements, it gets really complicated. Like factory reset, what happens after somebody puts in another software? How small is the memory footprint for like the minimal viable hardware? Who owns the certificates that go in? Like the challenges really came up when we went deeper on the requirements.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I'm going to echo what Jeff's sentiment was from last meeting. Yeah, definitely making this more high-level requirements, and then sort of diving deeper into it as we go along. Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. Thank you for that input.
Yeah, and I'm perfectly good with that, and I agree with that, Doran, as well. That I think we need to define the requirement, and then we figure out the implementation that we choose after that. So, I think that's important. Defining.
I'm just trying to point out, I guess, that the requirements we defined were never deep enough. And when we go to the actual implementation, we found all these corner cases that were painful.
Yeah.
Good point. Yeah, so maybe a session that starts here with high level, and then to your point, to try to get some of those edge cases, go into a deeper, low level requirements. Expand upon. Like this one would be a perfect one. Yeah, to expand upon and have a whole set of low level requirements just for this high level one. Yeah.
It's almost like a work stream that the group goes and puts together a proposal and then comes back and says, hey, this is how we should recommend it being done, and the group reviews it here or something like that. So
yeah,
I don't know.
Yeah, that sounds great. All right, yeah. Some of these are a little bit niche. This for some of these hardware category ones, I'm wondering whether or not that should actually be in here, even reliability ones. But I'll let the group decide. For example, requiring that a locking, and this really comes out of knowing the enterprise space, being in the enterprise space, and understanding how that might be different from a, say, data center or a different type of facility. In the enterprise, putting this locking power cable on the appliances means less accidental shutdowns of devices. It means less support calls, less cost. So that's kind of one take that we could do is add these in, or we could just leave that up to the implementation. And this might be too low level detail. What does everybody think?
I have a comment about reliability. Reliability is not only for hardware, it is also for software.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, and actually this one's a software one, software hardware, right? The ability to, and this might be already on most platforms, but the ability to set an automatic reboot in case of a power loss event. Again, this is thinking about, okay, I'm an enterprise. What are the types of things that are going to cause my help desk to get clogged up, and how do I try to mitigate those? So really, these four could even just be considered reliability. Let's see now. These three. Another software one, a watchdog on board. It's again whether the majority of platforms are going to have this already. Is defining it as a requirement here a little bit redundant? I don't know, right? But
software you need to design and implement the software to be reliable. But at runtime, when some problem happens, you don't want really to reboot the whole system. Like if one process has a bug or maybe floating point division by 0 or something like that, you don't want to reboot the whole system just because there is some bug in some process.
Oh,
You need to
sure.
reboot that process and the whole system will continue to run. Not all operating systems support this kind of micro reboot. So reliability is a big subject. When you
Right.
talk about software reliability, it also relates to how you design your operating system and how you design your software.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think if you look at other enterprise offerings for Wi-Fi, they have so many subsystems and systems they interact with, like a captive portal, a AAA, a location server. There's like, tens of these external systems. And when something fails, there's a lot of instrumentations around that and a lot of retry mechanisms. And you never reboot the entire device because it's serving multiple services at the same time. And so, for example, if the AAA is not responding for your employee network to allow them to authenticate, you're not going to reboot the device, but also because it's also serving the CCTV camera that's using a pre-shared key.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
No,
rebooting a
absolutely.
device only happens on the lower end of the market. Devices which are not sophisticated sort of tend to do this.
Oh.
Enterprise grade stuff that has all this diversity of services and features and integration. There's a lot more instrumentation that goes into it.
No, that's great. I'm glad I have folks here, industry and, implementation side. This could be taken out. It was something that I had seen in other instances, and yeah, it's one company doing it a certain way does not mean it's the right way. And I'm glad I have folks here to kind of correct that, because that's the value in this. So if everybody's okay striking this one, we could do that. Yeah.
So if you look at the enterprise, when you look at, for example, routing, there is something like OSCBF graceful restart. So when the OSCBF process failed, you have to gracefully restart it without interrupting the whole network. So
Right. Actually, that's a good point. So I could say, in the event of software lockup, graceful restart of service. Yeah, I mean, I could change it to that. Now, the only question I have is whether this is again at a point where, we're talking kind of implementation level and maybe table stakes for companies that are building enterprise grade devices. So let me just highlight this one, and I'm going to consider what we're going to do with that one. But I just want to also point out, this one, number 17. This kind of does fall into line with what we were kind of coming around, and that's whether we want the requirement of it being modular, the software, so that each process is allowed to fail and restart without the whole box failing. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Good.
What they call it micro reboot.
So I apologize.
So reboot the whole system. Reboot only
Question.
just as a process.
Oh yeah, please.
Yeah.
So what are we trying to achieve by capturing the high level goals? Is this to spec out an enterprise grade system that's disaggregated?
Yeah. So what this goal is to create the requirements, and then go through and look at the existing solutions after the requirements, and do a. I'm sorry, my this is being very slow. Oh, there we go. Create a list of different options, and then map those requirements to the existing features, and basically do a gap analysis. See if there's if there's something out there that meets all our requirements, if there's something out there that is missing requirements and we could find those requirements in another piece of software, or if there's a case where it's missing requirements and we don't have those, and we're going to have to consider, what would be, where's the development at? Is it going to one of those existing solutions and doing a feature request, or if it's internally developing those features and pushing out a patch for it, right? So does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. So
Great.
I guess the nuance I had in the question around, are we specing requirements for an enterprise system?
Yes.
It has this virtual disaggregation. If you look at current offerings in the enterprise market, right, typically this list is like thousands of items.
Mm-hmm.
So disk granularity, right? Like the
Right.
local power cable, right?
Yeah.
There's MTBFs, there's temperature ranges, there's PoE powered, PoE plus, what's the power envelope, there's
Yeah.
form factor, like, it goes on and on and on and on.
Yeah.
Are we trying to match what other enterprise grade systems have out there in the market in terms of the requirements?
Yeah, I do think you're right that boxing it in is key to having a useful set of requirements. To that end, we are just focusing on wireless in this one. I wonder if we want to even box it in further and just be considering wireless access points, or just being considering, wireless, wireless equipment like routers and controllers. So, I mean, this is basically the best way I know how to do it, which is just starting somewhere, right, kicking it off, and then kind of seeing how it evolves. So, I mean, I'm pro taking this and making this specific on wireless access points if we want, and then maybe we could have another tab. Basically, we have a set of hardware and software that we want to make sure interoperate together, and to that end, meet these certain requirements. Don't for example, just this first these first two here, the ability to put a NOS on, take a NOS off. Having a component of our system or our solution that doesn't allow for that is not going to be possible for the rest of the system to operate. So, am I kind of narrowing what you were thinking about, or?
Yes, I think obviously it would be good to define the boundaries. I'm
Yes.
just saying the boundaries is just Wi-Fi access point, hardware and software, plus the controller, right, which sort of makes the wireless system. Those systems, if you look at like a data sheet from a Ruckus, a Cisco, there's like thousands of line items there.
Yeah,
Easily.
you're absolutely right. In this case, we could talk about like .q tagging, and we could talk about the ability to create multiple zones and firewalling. But I guess what I would say is those requirements go pretty deep, like you mentioned.
Right.
And I think what we want is just to distill out those very important ones that are going to, again, like allow these solutions to interoperate with one another and have enough definition around them that they're going to be both inclusive on the side of well, this solution has that, or exclusive, defining, okay, this system does not have this, and in order for it to be considered as part of this solution offering, we're going to need those pieces in it. Yeah. So eventually, again, the point of this would also be to roll it down to a checklist in order for folks who are both making the hardware and software, either people on the phone, to look against and validate. Yes, okay, I have these 5 things that were required or were mentioned as required in order for these interoperability to happen. And because I have these things, I can consider this solution, or I could consider my product as part of this solution.
Okay, thank you.
There are different wireless LAN architectures, like some people put the controller in a switch, some people make the controller different from the wireless LAN switch. So how can these different solutions interoperate?
Good question, and that's where again we want to really distill out the requirements from a high level point that does not talk about that, or does not consider that as mandatory, as in, okay, it's required to have a hardware appliance, right? It's required to consume 50 watts. Like, these things are not I guess the goal. At least that's the way I see it. We want to just say controller is capable of doing X, Y, and Z, and whether it's a software-based one, hardware-based one, cloud-based one, it's meeting these checkpoints, and therefore, again, can interoperate with our solution, and therefore, is meeting the requirements. Yeah.
You are defining requirements.
This is Randy. Can you hear me?
Yeah, please.
For piece of functionality, controlling function, switching function, regardless of whether it is implemented in hardware, software, or even the two functions can be in one device or not, right?
Right.
You are defining requirements for a given function.
Right. We might not care about
how it is implemented.
How it's implemented. We just care about whether it does what we need it to do in order to interoperate. And sorry, Randy, didn't mean to cut you off there.
Oh, no worries. Well, I'm looking at this, and yes, I'm kind of new to this coming in, but some of the wording is kind of predisposing a solution. And I was just suggesting, like your hardware where it says locking power cable. So perhaps we list what the intent is, which is unintentional disruption is what we don't want, because there could be different approaches to do that. I mean, it's kind of a two-edged sword, but I think we don't want something that kind of tells someone how to do it. We want, we want interoperability at the same time. So it's kind of a two-edged sword. And the other one, what's highlighted there in yellow, the watchdog. From a pragmatic perspective, I love that. I think that's great. How we do that should be, there's different ways of potentially doing that. But maybe it's just the how we're labeling it or what we're calling it. It may, predispose someone. So some of it is just kind of wording, and just wanted to make that suggestion how we identify the titles and the description. Because there could be different technology solutions.
Yeah, no, you're right. Exactly. Yeah, and that's not for us to define, or it shouldn't be for us to define, right? It should be these are requirements. Implementation, right, is up to downstream, how you do it. So let me call this one. Is there another way to call this? Let's see. Enterprise. Reliability. Yeah, I might change that. But yeah, the point there is let's be less specific. Yeah, on even this one, right? For example, security. Not sure who put this in, but it's a good one to think about. Enterprise authentication, support for WPA2 Enterprise, 802.1x. Yeah, so whether we want to actually call this one out, or we want to just say generally what we want. We'll say that this does seem to be the prevailing technology right now in the enterprise when it comes to authentication, but there may be models of deployment that don't include this, but are as secure, like these zero trust solutions and what have you. Now, I don't know if those exceed these requirements, so then therefore they would be included. But what is everybody's thoughts about the specificity of this WPA2 Enterprise and 802.1x?
So kind of what we do in SDO is we're developing the same kind of set of on a minimum. So we would say this or an equivalent.
Okay. Support for 802.11 or equivalent. How do you kind of come around whether or not it's equivalent, right? Like what would it be that would tell you whether it's equivalent?
And that's, I think that's kind of the next level that we'll have to flesh out the details. But I think as a starting point, so that we don't lose our place, just a suggestion.
Okay, no, that's great.
Maybe suggesting some more detail on this. Right, so these are the security options for the service, right, the Wi-Fi service that you're providing.
Right.
WPA and 802.1x typically are coupled together when you're setting up an employee network. So employees could use their Active Directory credentials to log into the Wi-Fi network, and then the over-the-air traffic is encrypted. WPA2 has a big vulnerability that was found 2 years ago. So the industry is moving to WPA3, but still you need WPA2 support for legacy devices. But it's a very specific use case for typically employees connecting to the network. Now, the same Wi-Fi infrastructure in a lot of cases also needs support like headless devices, like a printer. A printer does not support 802.1x WPA2. It only supports a pre-shared key.
Right.
And then each vendor came up with a proprietary way of how to create a unique pre-shared key per device. Those devices that don't even support PSK, so you need to support an open network as well. So there's open, there's PSK, there's dynamic PSK, there's employee access, there are captive portals. There's roughly there's like 10 permutations at least of these authentication and encryption mechanisms that allow you to access different services on the Wi-Fi network.
Sure, and especially as we talk about even in retail and distribution centers and warehouses,
Right, exactly. So
those devices, yes, may only, like you said, support pre-shared key. They might only support WPA2, they 2.4, right? There's a whole list
there's a lot of legacy stuff. There's web,
legacy.
There's all sorts of junk out there.
Yeah.
But, again, just back to the point of that, if you really want to try to match up with an enterprise product, right, like this line item has, 27 different bullets under it.
Yeah. So, so this, let's say enterprise authentication, we could just say for users to kind of box this one in, and then there would be maybe one below it where we can talk about devices, and that's tough though, because I almost want to say that this would be what we want to define, and then maybe I don't know if we want to define those other things. Those are just going to have to come along for the ride. It's really hard question to answer. Yeah,
maybe
definitely.
Instead of calling out a specific security mechanism, like just specify that you want to connect a variety of devices and try to connect them with the most secure option available for that device.
Oh yeah, right.
So I would call out, the same network needs to service all types of all variety of devices, and it should attempt to connect them to the best security option available for the device class.
Yeah.
And I agree. I'm kind of going through this exact scenario right now in IEEE 3141, and I like the wording there's some embellishment that I think I can offer as a follow-up, but I think this is really good. Whomever that was made the suggestion, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. Yep. Okay. All right. So yeah, let me just also do a time check. We're about 15 minutes to the top of the hour. Yeah, like I mentioned, I did paste in here the spreadsheet for anybody who wants to go ahead and jump in there. So also feel free to add, change, comment. What I will say is it would be helpful if, let me just put this up here, initials, init. If you want to go ahead and if you make any new ones or make any modifications, if you want to go ahead and put initials if you're not logged in, it kind of helps. Or you could also be anonymous, but this also helps in just be able to come to this call and talk specifically to, you know, who wanted to change and, you know, sometimes the thought behind it, just to you know, kick off the discussion. So let me see if I missed any of these. Okay, so yes, we came through here and then, so POE requirements. So again, these are kind of defining the hardware that we're putting in and how its software is configured. I think this does have some value. I wonder whether or not there would be a way to reword this or add more to it to describe it. I think right now the state of POE is it's not in the Netlink API. It's not in the in the kernel. It's something that's implemented on top of whatever is already provided, and that's usually specific to each vendor. I think what we do want to do as a group here is try at least, and it's a tall order, but try at least to come around to one specific way to do this that we can call POE that meet the enterprise use cases, and try to maybe push to have that placed somewhere. Again, whether it's in the NOS, whether it's in the as low as the Netlink API, or maybe somewhere in between. But I do think there's a lot of value there. I don't know what other people think about that.
Is it appropriate for us to consider both the PD and PSE perspective of POE?
Sorry, PD and PSE, you said?
Yeah. Well, yeah.
The power delivery and then power source.
Power device.
That's right. Sorry, that's the sourcing. Yeah, that's the sourcing versus delivery. Yeah, no, definitely. One of the I haven't actually seen these devices out there, but I understand from one of my colleagues that works in South America, he's mentioned that this is something that's deployed not infrequently, particularly in remote locations where power might be a little sketchy, so that you can actually pull the power from another source. So yeah, I'd be pro. I mean, it's something that is in the enterprise, and it might not be in all enterprises, but it's definitely in the enterprise. Mm-hmm.
So just maybe some commentary on the enterprise side. So majority of deployments are based on PoE.
Yeah.
Just like people don't want to buy all the power bricks, right, to power the access points. And they sort of give them the ability to remote power cycle, right? If you shut down the port on the switch, you power cycle the access point. So majority of the deployments are PoE based. There's a lot of subtlety to it, like the PoE power envelope, right, which keeps on going up as you go to newer generations of Wi-Fi and 8x8 radios, right? So it's PoE++ in most of the cases.
Yeah.
And like, 802.11bt is starting to emerge within the enterprise because of the high wattage usage for these higher power radios. So the power envelope is always an issue. In terms of the hardware platform, so PoE in is sort of a given on almost any enterprise access point. There's also scenarios of PoE out when you want to daisy chain some other IoT device and you don't want to have another cable run. So like in a lot of cases, you plug like a security camera into an access point and then that feeds it power and connectivity. So PoE out is also available on some hardware platforms.
Yeah.
The other comment,
and things of that sort.
Yeah. So one question on the. Please. Please go ahead.
I mentioned last time there are more than one standard for PoE. So which one we like PoE plus and one line versus multiple lines in the PHY. So which one we mean when we talk about PoE?
Right. And I think for right now, I want this as a high level. And I think down the line, what we're going to have to do as an exercise, or maybe a work stream, is find out what would be the most both future looking and having the most impact today on, in addition to an enterprise. So taking a look at the landscape of devices, IP phones, cameras, IP cameras, wireless access points, and coming around to what is the most common, and again, what is the most future forward pick of PoE. And I think I mentioned this last time in the call too, that I was looking at the Starlink device from SpaceX that's doing PoE like 90 watts. So it's pretty incredible.
Not really 802. So the latest spec is 802.3 AT. That was the PoE plus version. Earlier was PoE is 802.3 AF, which was PoE.
Right.
And automobiles are looking at 2-wire PoE, which is a completely different power. So in a sense, AT is the widest. I mean, you're talking millions of ports per month. I'm on the committee.
Does AT does it back support AF? So can you plug in AF? Yeah. Okay, so that sounds like we might have an answer already, but let's find out. In maybe I think you mentioned also just doing work streams and having you on a work stream like that would be fantastic to have your experience in there.
Because what we were looking at is in the 2-wire automobile, because a lot of these door latch mechanisms actually are more than 802.3 AT, so that's why they were looking at another spec as a follow-up.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Yeah, I was reading up on that automotive networking and how the move is from CAN over to Ethernet. That was really interesting. Yeah. All right. So I think we touched on that. Well, any other thoughts on PoE? I think we have a lot to cover in this one, and I almost want to add another column and sort of earmark things for like work stream build outs. But any other comments on PoE?
Yeah, just would add a comment that a lot of the industry is sort of moving towards BT, which I think is going to follow after AT.
Okay.
And that's what addresses that 90 watts use case that you need for an 8.
Right, gotcha. Right, and what we have to figure out too is, does that standard meet enterprise needs today, and in the future, and is it also not too much of a burden as well to add into it, right? How much are we talking about on a BOM cost for, going with
Sure.
BP? Yeah, right. So, it's all I think in the work streams, but this is a good kind of good discussion to kind of get around at
Well,
least
maybe
what we're
a way
talking
to
about.
get this is to try to box like what's the wireless device you're trying to power.
Exactly, right. And in the enterprise, right, we're talking APs, IP cameras, IP phones, right? So, again, coming out to a survey on it and figuring out, well, this is what the enterprise needs. This is a nice to have for the enterprise. This is a future looking, sort of have these options and figure out, hey, this is how we want to, proceed going forward. This is gonna, hit the marks. So.
Part of
Yeah.
that,
So the
just
only
as an aside, part of that has to make sure we don't turn walls into heating blankets by putting too much current down there.
Yeah, definitely. Right, exactly. Consider the use case, right? Consider the use case and all of the, again, and especially, I mean, I've worked a few places, enterprise, I mean, retail specifically, that they really, they really want to minimize cost as well as have systems that they put in that last 10 years. I mean, they want to have them last 10 years. Whether they last 10 years or not, that's another question. But they're very I find them very forward forward looking, and it's refreshing. But at the same time, it is try to get the minimum amount in terms of cost. Biggest bang for the buck, I guess, is the way I put it.
So my final question, Jeff, is what are you going maybe in the definition section to mention all 4 standards for power over Ethernet?
Yeah, no,
And
we can definitely do that. Let me add that in.
which one of them, which one of them should be used in which circumstances or use cases?
Right. And I mean, we're going to definitely get to the point where we're defining something like that. But I think it's probably a lot of work in between there, or some amount of work in between there, to at least call out, right? These are the devices that we're serving in the enterprise. These are the categories of ones, and not be too overbearing on it, but at least boxing it into like a couple of categories worth of devices. Maybe one of these standards does them all, and we'll just call it that. Or maybe we do have to say, yes, we have a small switch that's for a retail store, and it's got these 4 devices. So for these small switches, we're going to go AT, or we're going to go maybe even AF, God forbid, right? But whereas this is a new office, and it's going to be using high-powered access points, and we're going to have to go BP, right, or whatever it is. But I think defining at least also these use cases, right, and then building the solutions around those use cases is going to be really valuable. Again, to someone in the enterprise that wants to deploy this and has a thought about these are the types of places I have in my real estate of offices and retailers, and these solutions that they've picked out for the enterprise. This one fits my office. This one fits my store, etc. So.
For industrial applications, we may
Industrial, yes, a warehouse, right? There's a whole set of and that's something I'd like to start up too. Is just a document that starts defining the enterprise as we kind of see it. So at least bucket it into these kind of 4 or 5 categories that we could then target. Because I'm putting this together for wireless controllers, for wireless access points, But in reality, when we're talking about outdoor wireless access points, indoor wireless, office wireless access points, wireless access points that go in warehouses, you know, the permutations, they start to get pretty big. So that's, you know, hopefully that's more, you know, medium to low level.
There was a project actually in
Yeah.
IEEE about wireless factory.
Yeah, wireless factory for sure. Yep. Yeah.
Document about it actually, if somebody's interested.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, it's the future and it's now. So yeah.
Well, just as an aside again regarding the Pee-wee, so there was a reason for going to the 100 meters in terms of power, and like I say, not starting fires and turning walls into heating blankets.
Yeah.
So there's you know, there's a lot of work that went into that, but like I say, the AT is what's most widely,
Okay.
more than 80% of the ports being shipped are now AT compliant.
Great. Well, very good. It's good to have, again, that industry experience here. Thank you. All right, so we're at the top of the hour. I think what we want to do is, again, paste the link here. I'll probably also just follow up with an email. Feel free to go in here, comments, you know, new wireless suggestions. I'm going to clean this up a little bit. I'll add in tabs for, you know, we're going to do controller, access point, and you know, and router, right? And then we'll just, you know, we'll just build this out. And you know, again, next steps after the build out, just not to get too ahead of myself, is to look at what's out there now, and then do the mapping. Yeah.
Yeah,
All
and
right.
my final comments, Jeff, is we talked here about software modularity, but I just send a link here about an excellent book about
Oh, thank you.
software
Oh yeah. Let me take a look at
reliability. That is the best book actually by John Moose,
All right.
who's a pioneer in this. So the question for you, when you talk about software reliability, modularity is one way to achieve software reliability, but there are many other things need to be considered to achieve the same goal described in that book. Are we going to go for all of them or just focus on modularity? Or
Yeah, that's
I don't know.
excellent. I just yeah, I definitely think of you know, what Sonic has done with you know, containerizing the different services. And I think even some of the major vendor players have gone the same route, Cisco, Juniper, and yeah, whether that's the best way or not, I guess we really shouldn't define that. Maybe we should just, you know, call out. Yeah, let's have a further discussion next time on this, because I have to get a little bit smarter on what it means to be reliable. Sounds like this book would be a good resource, so thank you.
yeah, and the software and the microservices, you can put it under modularity because you break the software into microservices to achieve reliability.
Yeah. Well, again, thank you very much, everyone. We're going to have another meeting in 2 weeks' time. So between then, again, go in the doc. Feel free to comment. I'll send out the link via email so we all have it again. And thanks, everybody, for participating.
Thank you.
Thanks.